or so, I think it will prove to be rather inconsequential for the Flyers.
Yeah, on the topic of the fourth line, it's been a topic of discussion on our show. Last episode, I think episode 2, if I remember correctly, we were debating about the Habs bottom six being exceedingly deep, and to a point where we actually spend the most amount of money, for that matter, on those bottom six. But on another Canadians-related note, Anthony, one of the questions I'm sure that a lot of people who's listening to this is probably asking themselves, and I mean, there's nothing really to say, but I mean, the name is there. The Philadelphia Flyers happen to have 2 ex-Canadian coaches behind the bench. We've long time ago, we've moved on from Alain Vigneault because he's carved his reputation mostly with the Vancouver Canucks, and now that he's with the Flyers and everything. But you guys got Michel Therrien behind the bench, who twice we booted out as quickly as we humanly could. So maybe with your insider knowledge, how is this team responding to someone of not just Terrien's strategical approach, but someone of his temperament as well? I mean, how are the players and even the fans, for that matter, how are they responding to having someone like Therrien behind the bench alongside Alain Vigneault?
Oh my God, I think the fans wanted Therrien fired the second that the ink dried on the contract. Look, you're guy. Trying to understand. Yeah, and look, Michel Therrien, I think that he is literally there because him and Alain Vigneault are friends. I think that's as far as it goes. He runs the power play and coaches the forwards. The power play, to me, hasn't been great under his watch, but at the same time, I look at the player personnel and how the power play was operating before he got there, and I'm not going to leave it all at his feet. The Flyers lack dynamic forwards, especially given the decline of Claude Giroux in recent years. He's still a great top 6 player, but he's not that 100-point guy that we came to know, let's say, in the mid-2010s. And then, they don't have really a sniper, quote unquote. They're up until this year. Now they'll have Yandel and Ristolainen, but, especially with Gostisbehere not playing every game because he just wasn't good enough as a 5-on-5 defenseman, they never really had a true power play quarterback. So I'm going to reserve judgment on Therrien until what I see what he can do this year with a bit of new forwards in the offensive group and now actual good personnel to run it from the back end. And as for Alain Vigneault, I've been a long defender of his. Obviously you get this whole narrative of, he built his career and his reputation on the backs of 2 Hall of Fame goaltenders with Luongo and Lundqvist. I find that an extremely lazy argument. Okay, so you have to win with bad goalies to be legitimate.
Because anyone could coach a team with Hall of Fame goaltenders that easily, right? So
yeah, exactly.
It is a lazy argument. Yeah,
it's a lazy argument because if you use Joel Quenneville, the only reason he had success is because he had the best winger of the last generation. You know what I mean? So exactly. I think that's a bit. I think that Alain Vigneault sometimes struggles to adapt. I think we saw that with against the New York Islanders, and a lot of fans turned on him this year. But here's the thing: is that since 2012, the Flyers have won 1 playoff series, and that was with Alain Vigneault steering the ship. So I think he gets a good kick at the can this year. That's why I don't think he was fired after last season, and I agree that he should not have been fired. But I think that now the clock is ticking because General Manager Chuck Fletcher turned over 25% of his roster, which is borderline impossible to do in a salary cap era, more so when it's a flat one. And now the ball is really in Vigneault's court. So, I think the fans struggle with Vigneault's tactics sometimes as more of kind of like an old school coach. But as long as the Flyers are winning like they were for a large portion in 2019-20, I think that erases a lot of the skepticism of Vigneault and, by extension, Michel Therrien.
Anthony DeMarco, NHL correspondent with the Fourth Period, is chatting with us. Unfortunately, Anthony, we're starting to run out of time, but your contribution here has been absolutely excellent. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. But I will ask you one last question because I'm not going to end this interview talking about the Flyers. We're going to talk about Bleu, Blanc, Rouge, and you're going to tell me what your predictions are for this year's Montreal Canadiens. Oh no! You don't need to do that big sigh. Okay, you be a little positive.
Look, this is not. I personally think they're going to miss, but I will preface it by saying that it's not going to be.
Come on.
Because look. Honestly, I think it's because you got to look at the rest of the field, right? Like, let's start with the Atlantic. Is it fair to say that regular season it's fairly locks to bank on the Lightning and the Bruins or not even the Bruins and the Leafs making it? Those two teams, Leafs and Lightning.
You can even throw in the Panthers for that matter.
Yeah, there you go, the Panthers. Yeah. So now I think Montreal will come in the wild card mix. I think that they could surpass the Boston Bruins, but I'm looking more at the Metropolitan Division, because when you look at the Metropolitan Division, there's only really one team in the Columbus Blue Jackets that you can definitively say they're not a playoff team. Every other team in the Metro, you can make a serious case can contend for a playoff position. Like, look at the teams who didn't make it last year. The Flyers turned over 25% of their roster. The New York Rangers spent all year trying to get tougher. Then you look at the New Jersey Devils, who made the biggest splash of the offseason, going out and getting Dougie Hamilton, signing Thomas Tatar, adding Jonathan Bernier. Like, there are a lot of teams that are going to be in the hunt for that wild card position beyond the Boston Bruins, because I think that, in light of them losing a guy like Tuukka Rask, and Jaro Halak's not going to be there, and you're kind of rolling the dice with Linus Ullmark as your full-time starter, and then David Krejci retires. Like, I could really hear the argument that the Canadiens will be a better team than the Boston Bruins this year. But then I'm also saying, who's going to step in for Phil Danault? Is Jake Evans ready to take on that role as like the premier defensive forward? Can Jesperi Kotkaniemi finally take that next step and show some more consistency in his game? Can Ryan Poehling finally make the crack? Like, I love this team when I look at their wingers. Like, they're arguably the deepest team down at wing. I love the addition of Mathieu Perreault. They bring back all, Joel Armia, Arturi Lehkonen, all these guys. Mike Hoffman's going to be a hell of a player on the power play. But for me, it is just that center ice position. I think that they're going to survive the Weber loss fairly well. I really like David Savard, one of the more underrated defensemen in the NHL. I think Alexander Romanov is going to take a step. So, I mean, for me, it's really going to come down to that center ice position. So I'm not definitively saying they're going to miss, but because of the hole and maybe the lack of depth down the middle of the ice, I'm just trepidatious when I match them up against the likes of the other teams in the Metro who, even the Pittsburgh Penguins, because you look at the top three teams in the Metro, is it going to be the Islanders, the Hurricanes, and the Capitals? And then you have the Penguins and the Flyers and the Rangers and the Devils all fighting for that wild card spot along with the Bruins and the Canadiens. It's going to be tough. There are going to be 2 or 3 very good teams that are going to miss the playoffs this year just because there just isn't enough real estate for all of them to get in.
All right, Anthony DeMarco, NHL correspondent for the fourth period. You could actually follow him on Twitter, as a matter of fact, at ADeMarco25. He's very active on the Twitter. Anthony, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with us. And we're going to give, we're going to set this up right now. We need to talk to each other again in April when I shove it down your throat that the Canadiens didn't make the playoffs and the Flyers missed it instead. So, on behalf of everyone, Scott, Sebastian, thank you also for being part of this little discussion. Anthony, thank you very, very much for being part of the show. Much appreciated, sir.
I loved it, boys, and thanks for dealing with all my connection issues. Very embarrassed, but hell of a first impression I left on you guys.
No worries, man.
All the best.
All right, boys, take it easy.
Thanks, you too. All right, so now it's time for the final segment of the night. It's been a long episode. There was so much to talk about. But now we're going to talk about a subject that is a little bit sensitive in the province of Quebec. Joining us for this panel, Scott Cowan, Sebastian Hyde, Joshua Rosa, Maria Buabdo. Lady and gentlemen, the Arizona Coyotes, our lovable Arizona Coyotes, who's had approximately 25 different owners, Gary Bettman, I think, injected about $20 trillion in NHL money to keep this franchise alive. They're in a bit of a squabble with the city of Glendale right now in order to keep using the arena. Now, apparently, the lease is supposed to end as early as after this season. There's been a bit of a squabble. Some people say it's negotiation tactics and everything, but now a lot of people are saying it's like, hey, maybe they can finally get out of here. Maybe they'll finally relocate. And of course, the popular topic is, they're probably going to move to Houston because, Houston is right beside. They get to stay in the same conference and they're a huge city. And anybody north of Texas doesn't exactly care about them and yada, yada, yada. But, however, the eternal optimists up in Canada, in Quebec specifically, are talking about the potential of the return of the Nordiques. So Joshua, Mr. Rosa, I will start with you. And I wish everyone can see us right now because we're all kind of grinning and being like, oh my goodness, this can go sideways so quickly. But, this is an audio podcast. We'll just have to deal with that now. So, Josh, I want to know your honest opinion. Is there even an iota of a chance that we're going to see the Coyotes move to Quebec City?
Well, for full disclosure, I think it's been mentioned before, but I'm not from Montreal. I'm not from Quebec City. I'm not actually from Quebec at all. I'm an Ontario guy living in a Quebecois world right now. So there's a bit of a degree of separation. And also, I haven't been alive that the Quebec Nordiques have played. I just missed them, unfortunately. So I'm a bit separated from the Quebec franchise. And of course, I would love another Canadian team in the NHL. More Canadian, the better. I just unfortunately don't see it. I think if this was the first time that the Phoenix/Arizona Coyotes were going down, then maybe. But they've had a bankrupt owner that's given it away to the league, and that didn't move them. Gary Bettman's in love with this franchise for some reason and hates Canada because Canada makes them absolutely no money. So as much as I'd love to see the Nordiques back, I just don't see it happening, unfortunately.
Maria, I'm sure you have an opinion about this. What is Gary Bettman's obsession with keeping the Coyotes in Arizona? I'll mention something that I've read just recently. Apparently, the state of Arizona itself has one of the highest media coverage in all of the United States. And that's just not only includes sports, it just includes everything as a whole, right? So, I'm sure it goes beyond that. But, Maria, what's your take? Why is he so obsessed with keeping that team in such a desolate, remote place that's just sucking money off of everyone?
I'm not sure about that exactly, but I just think having a team in the US instead of relocating to Canada is just more beneficial, financially. Just makes more money. They have more people, more viewers.
Well, you would think, right? Scott, I'm sure you don't want to interject in this because you're also like myself and even Sebastian, well, Joshua as well, because he has a whole segment about history. We love history on this show, ladies and gentlemen. We've seen a franchise in Quebec. It's flourished. There were dedicated, passionate, hardcore fans, but they left because the financial outcome was just disastrous. The Canadian dollar at the time was just absolutely poor. It was a miracle that all the other teams survived, which, well, actually, it's one of the reasons why the Jets moved as well, is because of the economy. But a second time around, Scott, are they actually can they actually succeed under this current financial cloud that we're under?
One of the important things to always remember about the original Nordiques is that the Nordiques had one of the most dedicated markets in the NHL, but it was also one of the smallest markets in the NHL in Quebec. So that's ultimately what led to the demise. Heck, that even almost killed the Canadians in the mid 1990s when Rachel Hull was dealing away every single good player the team ever had. And Ronald Corey was the president. They almost got moved as well before things kind of resolved themselves. And the Quebec Nordiques coming back to the NHL has been a continually interesting anomaly for fans to ponder about for many, many, many years, ever since they first moved to Colorado and then won the Stanley Cup immediately the year after, which obviously kind of hurt a lot of Quebec Nordiques fans who would have loved to see a cup come to Quebec, as it never quite did. But I definitely think it's more just speculation at this point. I just don't really think that there's really a market for hockey in Quebec that's large enough to be able to support